Good evening and a warm welcome to tonight's online Llafur event. I'm Ian Rees, Chair of Llafur, the Welsh People's History Society. Thank you for joining us. Before we get underway, just one small housekeeping issue. Please can I remind you all to ensure you're on mute to avoid any background noise. Thank you. One other important item before we start. Following on from the successful launch last year of the Marion Gwynne Jones Essay Prize, Llafur has recently released an announcement on social media about the next round of the prize for 2022. Entry is open to all previously unpublished authors, and essays are invited on any aspect of Welsh social or cultural history. Essays can be in English or Welsh, and should be between 6,000 and 8,000 words. The deadline for entries is the end of July 2022. For full details of the prize, please see the Llafur website and our Twitter account. I believe James is going to post a link to these in the chat. Thank you, James. Okay, so on now to the evening session, which is the second of three events in Llafur's Spring 2022 series on heritage, landscape and tourism. The title for tonight's event is Workers' Holidays and Seaside Resorts. From Llandudno and Rhyl in the north to Barry and Porthcawl in the south, Wales has produced a tradition of seaside resorts, often significant urban meeting places and nodes of sociability, as the historian Andy Kroll has described them. These resorts were also in part byproducts of broader campaigns for annual workers' holidays that began in the mid-19th century. With particular reference to North Wales, we're delighted to welcome our guest speakers tonight, Susan Barton and Debbie Owen, for an exploration of the history and heritage of seaside resorts and working class popular tourism. To chair tonight's event, I'm delighted to introduce Marion Gwynne. As a heritage consultant specialising in Atlantic slavery and empire, Marion's work challenges traditional presentations of history at country houses and museums. She advises Race Council Cymru on issues of heritage and diversity and works with private and public organisations across the country, helping them to develop more inclusive ways of working. She is also, of course, a valued member of Llafur's Executive Committee. Marion, thanks again for joining us this evening, and over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ian, and welcome to everybody again. Now, I'm delighted to chair the second in our spring series of talks and discussions on the theme of, as Ian has reminded us, heritage, landscape and tourism. And do please use the chat box to raise any questions, comments, or share any information that you may have. And we'll come to these during the Q&A session at the end. Now, we got off, as I'm sure you will remember, to a great start on the 10th of March with three excellent presentations on how Wales has been seen through historic journals and letters and through modern day heritage trails and apps. And I've no doubt our second event tonight will be equally inspiring. Its topic is, of course, workers' holidays and seaside resorts. Now, both tonight's talks resonate very deeply with me. Working class tourism. I lived in Stoke-on-Trent for a few years at the beginning of the 1980s, at a time when pits and pots still ruled. And the annual Potter's Fortnight was an event no longer needed because of electric kilns, but not even a modern school timetable could break local demand for it at a time that disrupted the modern school timetable badly. And Rhyl, any person I think over the age of say 30 in North Wales would probably have very enduring memories of a trip of Sgol Sul, the Sunday school trip to Rhyl, an event that saw more kids attend church than any promise of salvation. But of course, working class holidays raise issue well beyond the frivolous and extend into the fight for rights, pay and access to leisure. Now, our first speaker tonight is Dr. Susan Barton. a historian living in Leicester, where she is an honorary visiting research fellow at de Montfort University. She is the author of several books and papers on social history, especially the history of tourism and sport. Her special interests include working class tourism and leisure, package holidays, Swiss tourism, winter sports, and internment during the First World War. A wonderful set of connections there. And our second speaker is Debbie Owen. Debbie has worked in public libraries for almost 30 years and now works for Denbighshire County Council, where she manages 2 libraries in Rhyl and Prestatyn. And no doubt she has a wealth of knowledge about the collections held at those sites relating to this subject. Welcome both. And so on to our first speaker, Dr. Susan Barton. Over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, I'm just finding my presentation to share. There. Is it on the screen now, I think? So I'm looking at workers' holidays and seaside resorts, and I'm going to pay special attention to things which affected the North Wales coast rather than North Wales generally. There were fewer holidays after the Industrial Revolution than there were before, because people worked according to the sort of natural rhythms of nature, and holidays and festivals tended to be around religious events and were very traditional and took place at times such as Whitmonday, Easter, and the things to do with church festivals like the wakes, the rush bearing, or revels as they were called, depending on where you were. But the Industrial Revolution meant that those holidays were taken away as work discipline was enforced upon people. But before that was able to really take a hold, there were various ways and means that people had of having a holiday and making sure that they had free time. So I'm going to be looking at the conditions for working class holidays to take place in an industrial context and how this began in the 19th century. For people to go on holiday, there are 5 conditions that have to be met. You need to have cheap and rapid access to the coast, some spare income so that you can save up, or don't need to save if you're well off. You need to be able to make choices about what you spend your money on. You need blocks of free time to be able to go somewhere. It's no good if you've only got a few hours or one day, you're not going to go far from home. And you also need adequate facilities in the places that you want to go to so that you've got something to see and somewhere to stay when you get there. If you look at the picture, I think that was just showing you what a postcard said about people on holiday. So for most of the year, the person's working in a mill, a factory.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Susan.
Yeah.
Could you make your screen full screen, please?
Oh, isn't it? Sorry.
No.
Is that better?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, that's better. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's because I've got pictures of people at the side, so I can't see the whole screen myself. And people who were working in the mills could, although they might not earn a lot individually, they had high household incomes because of the impact of women working. And so people would save up not just for their holidays, but for new clothes to wear when they went on holiday, and then to last them through the year as Sunday best. And the other thing that you have to do if you're spending money on a holiday is that you need to have enough money to pay for your bills and household expenses whilst you're away. And people often came back with no money whatsoever. So they would be in sort of dire straits when they arrived back home after having spent all their money on their holiday. The first point that I made was that you needed access to the coast to be able to go somewhere. So I'm looking at North Wales. So I looked at the North Wales Coast Railway, which opened in 1850 for the Irish mail coaches, which connected Holyhead with Crewe and Lancashire, and then later with the Midlands and London. And these connections linked the North Wales coast to the industrial areas of Lancashire, the cotton mill towns, and the manufacturing areas in the Midlands, and the mining areas as well. And I'll look at some of the different patterns of holiday making which took place there. Blocks of free time, I already mentioned that initially these were based on religious types of holidays, for example, the wakes, the revels, rush bearing, which were to do with the celebration of saints, to which churches were usually dedicated, Easter Monday, Whit, markets and fairs. But these were things which took place locally, and people didn't travel very far to go there. They might go there from a nearby village or town, but they certainly wouldn't be going far away. There were local attractions where whole communities would attend, like going to the races or a fair, as I've already said. And when these things were happening, factory owners often found it difficult to force people to go to work. So people were able to collectively make sure that they had time off to go to places that they wanted to by running off together. So even if their employer said, no, you can't have the day off to go and watch the races, there wasn't much they could do about it if everybody said that they were going to go and just up and went, and that was just called running off. Sometimes people could negotiate and get permission to do that. And again, these were based around traditional local forms of entertainment. Other reasons that people would get free time was with factory shutdowns for maintenance. In the mills, often they would close so that the machinery could be repaired or cleaned. And seasonal fluctuations. There might be times of year when there wasn't much work to be done because of demand being higher at different times of year. So how did people go on holiday, if they did, before there were holidays with pay? One thing could be if they were well-paid craftsmen who were quite independent, they worked often at home or in very small workshops, and they were able to take time off when they pleased because the labour discipline in those circumstances was quite lax. And to pay for the time that they took off, even though they weren't paid, would be done by having short bursts of hard work for the week or so before they went away. So they had bull week, which was the week before you went away, a calf week, a cow week and a calf week. So they would work hard just to make extra money on the days and weeks leading up to their holiday. People in small factories and workshops tended to have low pay and irregular work, so they weren't able to make savings. But again, if they were paid on piece rates, they could, in theory, be able to earn enough in the weeks leading up to the holiday to have some money put by. Factory shutdowns and maintenance, for some people that was seen as unemployment, and they could claim unemployment benefit from their welfare societies or from their unions if they were in unionised workplaces later on in the 19th, early 20th century. So they were not necessarily destitute just because the factory was closed. Workers in regular, relatively well-paid employment were able to put money aside throughout the year and had savings clubs. And this began really in the northwest of England in the cotton mills. And again, that's an area where you've got the influence of women workers on the household income and how it was spent. But it's important to remember that when people were saving in their holiday club, it wasn't just to pay for a holiday. The time that the factory was closed, they had no income. And so it would be used to pay rent, to buy new clothes and essential items as well. So it was not just about holidays. There were also later from about the 1920s, things called contributory schemes, where workers would put money into a savings club and then the employer would top it up. So for instance, in shoemaking, the employer would give, say, 15 shillings for every 85 shillings that a worker contributed. But it wasn't just a gift, it was used to discipline people, because if you were absent or if you were off sick, you might not qualify for the work for that gift, or if you were late, you might not qualify to have that additional gift from the employer to top up your holiday pay. It's also quite important to establish that workers needed to accept the principle of a holiday. Many people objected to being paid for not working, and they actually thought that it was better to save for your holiday, because that way the worker had control over what they did with their own money. They were being told they could choose what to spend it on, whereas if they were told that they had to have a holiday, that was seen as an attack on their independence, because they felt it ought to be their own choice whether they took the holiday or not. So accepting the principle that it was okay to be paid for the holidays was quite an important thing if there were going to be campaigns for paid holidays. So I've put on this screen, let's see if I can move that. So it was first debated by the TUC in 1911, which was just seen as too utopian, so it wasn't seriously considered. And then 1914, boot and shoe workers in Leicester called for paid holidays because they wanted it to be an equality issue. It was about having parity with office staff who did get paid for their holidays. So people in clerical jobs and in the municipal occupations and railways had paid holidays from the late 19th century, but it wasn't widespread through manufacturing and working class jobs generally. But those in offices did get paid holidays, and so it was seen as unfair. After World War I, the building trade workers called through the TUC for paid holidays, and there was also quite a lot of industrial unrest around as soon as the war ended, 1919, 1920, and quite a few different occupation groups received paid holidays from that time. But that was only a small minority. The people that didn't manage to achieve that through industrial action then had to wait until the 1930s before they actually got a paid holiday. Through the 1920s, the campaign grew in momentum. The TUC was now calling for 2 weeks paid holiday because some of its members already had 1 week. And there was private members' bills, a campaign called Holidays for All, which all failed until 1937, when there was a select committee on holidays with pay led by Lord Amelray, or sometimes it's called the Amelray Committee. And that reported in 1938, and it led to the legislation called the Holidays with Pay Act. So what did holidays with pay actually mean? It was actually quite a weak piece of legislation, and it didn't affect all that many people. Only those that were in occupations governed by the trade boards. And if you think that many people worked in those days in farming and agriculture or were domestic servants, they would be excluded. And the better organised workers in large workplaces already had holidays with pay. So it was passed really as a compromise because the employers didn't want to have state interference in setting conditions of work. The TUC had campaigned that the workers should not have to contribute money towards their own holidays in savings schemes, and that view prevailed. But the legislation only really proposed to have 3 days rising to a week, although the TUC had asked for 2 weeks holiday. As already said, it didn't apply to all workers, and also it didn't come into effect, but it was delayed until 1940-41, by which time the war had broken out and holidays were not on the agenda. But one important principle it did establish was that holidays would become a condition of employment, not linked to pay. Also, it meant that whilst you were being paid for your holiday, contributions to any health or unemployment insurance through friendly societies and so on would also be paid. But the impact was small, and in 1939, 10 million workers still had no paid holiday. Now I'm going to look at some of the things which made it, the other thing which I said was important to make it possible for workers to go on holiday, and that is having appropriate places for them to go to. So we can see the development of Colwyn Bay from 1865 by Sir Thomas Erskine, and that was mostly hotels built on building plots by individual designs, set up as boarding houses or second homes. And sorry, I'm getting a bit croaky, with a pier, and we see bathing huts on the beach and so on. And it was really not 1875, it was going to be more for the lower middle class people to go there, or middle class people that already had holidays which were paid out of their salaries and or could afford to travel. It wasn't necessarily for the working class or the lowest paid workers. Llandudno as well was owned by Lord Mostyn, and again that was devised as a specially built as a holiday resort in the mid-19th century, and it could be reached by rail. So both Colwyn Bay and Llandudno could be reached by rail, and then later by steamer. And again, that was a resort with a good social tone. So it was for respectable people, aimed at middle class people, and I would guess at English speakers as well. It could also be reached by boat from Liverpool and by the steamboat company, and also later on it was there for day trips. You could also use a steamboat for excursions whilst you were already on holiday in North Wales. There was a tram as well between Colwyn Bay and Llandudno. It didn't go any further towards any further east than Colwyn Bay, probably because they wanted to restrict the people travelling about, the respectable people that were staying in the hotels and boarding houses of the middle class resorts. One film that makes that point about Llandudno being a more high class place was Hindle Wakes, which was a play written in 1912. And I've watched the silent movie from 1927. And it's about two mill girls who go on holiday to Blackpool. And whilst they're there, one of them meets the boss's son, and they start to go out and go to the fair together and so on. And then the wealthy boss's son suggests that they go in his car with the chauffeur to Llandudno. And whilst they're there, enjoying the more upmarket attractions of that seaside town, while the poor friend is left at Blackpool, the girl in Blackpool drowns. But when the other girl returns home, she's unaware of that tragedy, and so her affair is discovered. Now I'm looking at the places where perhaps some of the less affluent people went, mostly probably from the northwest of England in the mill towns, as they started to have, even if not paid, they were able through negotiation to get days off work. So by the 1890s, some of them were already having a week off work. Or the 1906, it was about 10 days because it included Easter and so on as well. And the nearer to the industrial centres the railway was, the cheaper the fares. So you're more likely to get resorts aimed at people with less money in the end of the line, which is nearest to the industrial towns. So then we start to find the development of Rhyl and the harbour there as a holiday camp. And you can see the spellings change because it's aimed at English speakers with the cooperative society. That was run from Coventry Co-op, where people in Coventry were able to save up their divvy towards going on the holidays, pay into a savings scheme, and it was self-catering to keep the costs down. Cooking was done using Primus stoves and paraffin supplied by the camp, who also lent them the pans and the crockery. And it started out with just a few tents and some railway carriages, as a lot of these popular campsites or holiday campsites were when they first began. The ethos of not making a profit meant that there were no funds for maintenance. And so the camp soon closed by the 1970s, and it was rented in the first year. But after that, the success meant that the co-op, or Coventry Co-op, bought the camp for themselves, bought the field that it was in, and built wooden huts. And the camp shop there was also run by the Rill Cooperative Society, which donated its own divvy to the camp sports and entertainment funds. The closer you got to the end of the line, the more sort of lower cost holidays prevailed. So initially with tents, later on it became more caravans. So you can see there that there were holiday camps all along that coast, which were accessible by train as well from the northwest and from the Midlands, which is where most of those holiday makers came from. One of the things with seaside architecture is an element of fantasy. So you can see Golden Sands Holiday Camp. Really, it makes it look like it's a sunny place. You'd think it was on the Mediterranean with those colours, which sort of evoke sunshine and heat and golden sands. It was next door to the co-op camp, and so once the co-op camp closed, then they bought the land and expanded their own campsite. So, but initially the camp owner, Arthur Jones, set it up with just bell tents, timber chalets, and a hall for entertainment and games. Closer to the border with England was Prestatyn Holiday Camp, which was a partnership of Thomas Cook and Son with the LMS Railway. And it became known as Cook's Camp when it opened in 1939, probably hoping to benefit from the new tourists which were now going on holiday because of the Holidays with Pay Act. And it was probably built as a response to that. And again, here we've got the fantasy architecture, very modernist, with the Hamelin Tower and umbrellas, quite modern in style. Probably something which most people in the industrial towns would not have seen, that kind of architecture where they came from. So it would evoke a kind of fantasy world or a luxury experience to them. It was a upmarket. It wasn't self-catered like the co-op camp and Golden Sands. It was fully inclusive with chalet accommodation, no tents. And the dining hall could seat 1,750 people in one sitting. And apparently it had the largest fryer in the world, which could cook 2,000 portions of chips at once. It was later sold to Pontins in 1975 and renamed Tower Beach. But it's unusual for Pontins. The guests had to pay extra to use the entertainment facilities and so on. It's no longer there, it's been demolished. So just a summary, or to summarise for Holidays with Pay, 1851 I've put down as a start because some exceptional employers were able to give paid leave to their staff who went to go to the Great Exhibition. That was also where I first encountered Savings Club for people to be able to go away as well, so that they were able to save up, have a few days off, go to London to the Great Exhibition in 1851, and a very few did get paid leave as well for that. 1925, 1.5 million people were receiving paid holidays, and you can see that number doubles over the decade to 3 million with paid holidays. But although only 3 million people had paid holidays, 15 million were going away. So you can see that the principle of a holiday was by then well established. and that's went up as we got nearer to the Holidays with Pay Act. Once the Amulray Committee or the Select Committee was doing its research, because of what I said, that employers didn't want to have the state interfering. After the war, though, 15 million now had holidays with pay. That's 80% of the workforce. And the Holidays with Pay Act was more or less superseded, because most people by then were having 2 weeks holiday rather than the limited amount of time that the Holidays with Pay Act specified. And that was reinforced in 1998 with the European Working Time Directive, which restricted the amount of days and hours that people could work. So that's my presentation over.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much.
Share. And I'm sorry I couldn't see the clock, so I don't know how long I spoke.
No, perfect, to the dot.
Oh, that's good.
So your inner clock was working wonderfully. And I do please raise all your questions for Susan in the chat box, please. And I'm delighted now to welcome our second speaker, Debbie from Denbighshire Libraries. Over to you, Debbie. Thank you very much indeed.
Just get my screen up. Is that okay? Can everybody see that all right?
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm based at Real Library, and I was just going to talk to you about a project that we worked on during the last year or so. It's going to be a very visual presentation, this one. So this is Real Library, lovely place to work, just a very short walk from the front, which is very nice for us. As well as all the usual things that you'd expect to find in the library, books, newspapers, magazines, computers. We've also got a fairly large local history collection, and we're home to the museum. The museum is small, but it's perfectly formed. This is a fantastic mural that we've got painted on the walls that depicts the promenade in Rhyl from around 1910. It also has various exhibits depicting the history of Rhyl. This one we can see, this is a bath chair that came from a wicker bath chair that was last used on Rhyl Promenade in the 20s. Assorted mementos and gifts, and on the left you can see there's like a little scale model of the pier hidden down there. This is mementos of the lifeboats. They first arrived in Rhyl in September 1950. And okay, this is just a background to our project. Yeah, so basically we got to March 2020, lockdown, and all our libraries were closed. And we were sort of thinking what else we could do. Our ICT team were great, and they issued all our staff with laptops, so we were able to work from home. To start with, we were involved with calling all our shielding residents to make sure they had access to food and medicine, and some people just enjoyed having a chat, I think, with the library team. And then we also sort of started to think about what else we could do. How could we open up the library services to people at home while our buildings are all closed? Obviously, we've got access to some great services like BorrowBox, so we could offer ebooks, audiobooks, we could offer digital magazines, and we introduced digital newspapers as well. We did rhyme times over Facebook Live. My Rhyl team even produced a little puppet show that you can find on our YouTube if you're interested in having a look. And then we also had the opportunity to do probably the same as everybody. We did lots of webinars, lots of learning opportunities. So one that we attended, a few of us attended this one, creating, sharing and measuring the impact of public library digital content, that was run by the People's Collection and in conjunction with CILIC Wales. The People's Collection, probably everybody's familiar with it, but it's a brilliant platform that enables us to share all our materials to a wider digital audience. It's full of fascinating photographs, documents, audio and video recordings, and stories that link to the history, culture and people of Wales. When I checked earlier, I think there was over 150,000 items that have been shared on there now. So a few of us attended the session, and then we shared it with the rest of the team, and we thought it would be a really good platform to share some of our local history materials as people couldn't come and visit them in person. As it happened, the previous year, I'd been contacted by a local solicitor to say that a local resident had bequeathed his collection of postcards to us in his will. I arranged to go and meet the solicitor at the gentleman's house to collect them. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get, but I actually got this fantastic collection of almost 1,000 postcards of Rill that the gentleman had put in plastic folders. They were all catalogued and indexed. It was a really amazing collection. But we hadn't really decided what to do with them. And I have to admit that they'd just been sat in my office gathering dust for a few months because we wanted to make them available, but also we felt like, well, we've got to look after them and preserve them for the future. So after we did this training, we thought it would be a fantastic way to share them with other people. I think we've only got about 90 up on the site at the moment, as we've tried to choose some of the more interesting ones. And some of them have been viewed over 100, 150 times, which is, you know, really amazing to us. Cataloguing the postcards was something that we could do from home when the library was closed, in between all the other jobs that we were doing. And it was a team effort. Some people did the scanning of the postcards. Some people did the indexing. Some people did the translating. And checking that the Welsh was all correct. And unfortunately, we had to sort of stop doing it now that we're back open as normal, but hopefully we can start doing it again. All our team really enjoyed doing it. They learned lots of new skills, and they got a lot more interested in local history at the same time as well. I'm not brave enough to do a live demonstration on the People's Collection, but this is just a screenshot of the Rill Library page from the People's Collection website. You can see we've just got like 90 items on there at the moment. When you set up an account to upload items, it's really easy. You basically just register, they approve you, and you start uploading documents and photographs, whatever you have in your collection, really. So I've sort of picked on an example of the steamer leaving Rill Pier. That's from 1912. This is one of the postcards we've uploaded. Sorry, my dog's climbing over my knee. I can click on it to enlarge it. I can look down the bottom of the page, and we have to put in a brief description, dates if we've got them. They're also tagged with subjects, so that if you are looking for holidays and resorts, or the 1910s, or cities, towns and villages, it comes up along with those as well. And it's really easy to search just by keyword on the website. You can download the images as long as it's not for commercial purposes, so it's a great resource for looking at things like that. I've done seen that one. Oh, I'm going backwards, sorry. Back forward again. Right, okay. This isn't a great example, but it has also got a mapping function. So when you upload a document, you drop a pin on a map to show where it's located. Obviously, this one's in the middle of the sea because it's a boat. But you can also see that there's different dates on the map, so you can change them to look at later ones if you want to. So it's a really good resource. Okay, so just going to share you a little bit more information about Rill now, just building on what Susan's already mentioned. So in the early 19th century, Rill was described as a small village with a population of about 300 people. By the mid-1830s, it had become a fashionable watering place with the well-to-do, with people arriving by paddle steamer from Liverpool or overland by horse-drawn carriage. In 1841, the population was 974, yet it was almost 3,000 by 1861. So you can see how much it expanded. And that's a lot of it is due to the Chester to Holyhead Railway opening as far as Bangor in 1848, as it became a much more popular destination for everyone. By 1900, over 8,000 people lived here, and the town had become a popular destination with people from Merseyside, Lancashire, and the North Midlands. This is sort of one of the oldest pictures that we've got in our collection. from the 1860s. And here's another lovely one here. I've just selected a few different ones that we've from our collection to show you. This gentleman enjoying the sunshine on the bench. It's one of the earliest ones. It's dated around 1871, but the postcard would have obviously been produced a little bit later than that. This postcard is of the Queen's Palace, which opened in 1902. The postcard's dated from 1906. It was a 4-storey building with a glass dome and included a theatre ballroom, fairground sideshows, and an underground Venetian lake, complete with gondolas. Unfortunately, it did burn down only 5 years later, so that's quite sad for the building. But it's quite interesting to see how they used to produce so many postcards, because they've got all different views of it. This is the theatre and the ballroom. This is the fantastic roof gardens. And then we've got the pictures, postcards of, unfortunately, the dome on fire and the derelict building. There, you can see that there's so many postcards produced, because this is the golden age of the postcard, sort of 1905 to 1915, when millions of picture postcards were sent every day. In 1909, for example, a total of 866 million cards were processed by the post office in Britain. And in Wales, the growing demand saw regional and local publishers flourish here too. This is the pleasure grounds and the water chute around Marine Lake, which is another main attraction in Rhyl at the time.
The compliance, almost like I guess, an obedience.
So this one's dating from 1915. Also at Marine Lake, there was a miniature railway which opened on the 1st of May 1911, and the miniature railway is actually still there today. And I do believe they have some of the original steam engines there too. This is the pavilion and the stands at Rhyl in 1913. The pavilion was built on the promenade in 1908. I think it's a really impressive building with its 5 domes. Unfortunately, that was demolished in 1974 as it was deemed unsafe. Another photo of the pavilion and the open air theatre there. I think this one was from the 1947. Again, on the People's Collection, this one's had 137 views, so it's nice to think that so many people have been looking at the postcards. This is the Pier at Rhyl. Again, unfortunately no longer there, which seems to be a bit of the story of Rhyl. It opened in August 1867. It's 718 metres long at a cost of £23,000. Entertainments included the Bijou Theatre, bands, dance, Pierrot troupes, and slot machines and diving competitions. It suffered from various accidents. In 1883, a schooner rammed into it. In 1909, it suffered storm damage. In 1913, the theatre was damaged by fire. And following damage in World War I, it remained closed until 1930. In 1966, it was declared unsafe and it was demolished in 1973. Another one here of various views of Rhyl. I don't know whether you can see the postcard itself, because I don't know whether the images of other obscuring it. This is various views of Rhyl around 1918 and the postcards heading off to Bolton. Dear Mother, just a few lines to let you know I'm enjoying myself. The address is not Mrs. Williams, but very near. It is the Swan Inn, Russell Road, Rhyl. We are having very good weather and there are plenty of people here. On looking at the back of the postcards, there's quite a strong theme of the sea being rather rough and being a bit windy. It seems to be a general theme. Oh, here we're going a bit older. This is the Gentleman's Bathing Beach on the East Parade in Rhyl. There were about 200 bathing machines that could be towed down to the water's edge. The ladies' bathing machines were to the west of the pier and the gentlemen's were to the east. The picture also shows the Royal Alexandria Hospital that can be seen in the distance at the centre of the postcard. Another fond greeting from Rill. This is a little brief postcard. Having a nice time here. My first peek into Wales. I think that was going off to Hampshire in 1927. Another general views of Rill from 1930. I wish you could have been here with us. We both feel lots better, although not good weather until today. It seems more settled now. Shall be pleased to see you any day you can come. Mother keeps better. I just find it fascinating. I could spend all day looking at reading the backs of the postcards. This is the last one I've included. This has come right up to the 1980s, but I have fond memories of this one because being from South Manchester, we used to love coming to the Sun Centre. It was a big treat to come and have all the excitement of the wave machines and eating chips in your swimming costume. That was a big feature of my childhood. And that's me. That's some of the books that I've used on the history of Rill, and that's me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed, both of you, for what has been an absolutely fascinating and so informative overview of working class tourism and the development of Rill, told through postcards. Right, just going through some of the questions that we've had here now. The first one I would say is aimed at Susan, and the question asked by Becky is, and this is one I'm very interested in myself, where did the idea of going away from? I hate the word, but did it trickle from the Grand Tour or something?
The Grand Tours were something which were for the elite, the sons of the aristocracy, as part of their education. So they would travel with a tutor to things on a set itinerary that they were things that you ought to see and know about. So particular galleries in Italy and Greece, and those kinds of places, often associated with classical history and the arts and culture. After sort of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, which prevented people from travelling, they became less aristocratic, because by then some of the wealthy industrialists who owned perhaps the factories in Manchester or had made money in other ways were able to afford it as well. So it was slightly less elite, and sometimes young women would go as well on these tours. But I don't think that they had an awful lot to do with working class holidays, because they were about education, about seeing what you ought to see, about developing an upper class identity for being cultured, bringing back souvenirs to decorate your mansion, and so on. I think for the working class, where it comes from is, as I said, to do with the traditions of the wakes weeks and running off, whereas most things tended to be quite local. And then once railways were developed, people would go on excursions for day trips using the trains, which must have been really exciting, because even on the days that the railway opened, there were passengers wanting to go on trips and having a ride. And I think it's develops more from that. So as people were able to secure more time off, then they would go further away, and they would stay overnight, or perhaps for a few days. So that's, I don't think there is a trickle down really. The first time I found working class people going away in large numbers and staying overnight was the research that I did on the Great Exhibition, and there were proper, like, hostels, we'd call them now, set up, which was actually described as for the working classes or for working men. So you were told where you had to stay, and wouldn't be welcome if you were trying to go to places which were really for the elite.
A very comprehensive reply. Thank you very much indeed. And the next question is from Roz, and this one is from Debbie, for Debbie. And Roz asks, are most of the messages on the cards in English, or are some written in Welsh? Any written in any other languages?
Mm-hmm.
All the ones that I've seen, they are in English, and they are all real. I don't know, that just sort of a bit of a testament to the fact that a lot of people were coming from sort of Manchester, the Wirral, that sort of area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I sort of observed, because you've got this change in spelling of place names, the anglicised versions or just translations. So you can see that the tourist resorts are aimed at English speakers rather than Welsh speakers. Whether changing the language was deliberate to put Welsh people off, or I don't know, or whether it was just that speaking English was the language of the people that they wish to attract. But it could show that at that time, when the resorts opened, that Welsh people were perhaps just too poor to go on lengthy holidays anywhere.
Thank you, thank you. And then the next one I'm throwing out to both of you. Can anyone speak to the differences between the working class resorts of the north and the south? And this is from Daryl Perrins. The north and the south, Saundersfoot, Porthcawl and Barry Island were all coal pots first and centres for tourism second. Also, the southern resorts had an exclusively Welsh visitor population, unlike the ones in the north, which were dominated by the culture of the mills.
I think that's half been answered within the question about the people in the north being attracting people from the mills. And I think I sort of picked up on the idea of a class difference as you travelled further west along the coast. I didn't know an awful lot about the background to Rhyl, so that was really interesting for Debbie. I didn't know it had such a long history as what I put in inverted commas, a respectable resort for respectable people, not established for mill workers. I think the north was possibly developed sooner because it was getting people that had disposable income working in the factories. Those in the south, the miners didn't have that saving habit. So they were later and more reluctant to take holidays far from home or to go away anywhere because they would do the savings thing, you know, the bull week. They'd work harder because they're on piece rates. So they do a bull week, a cow week, a calf week on the weeks leading up to the holiday. The other thing that is different in the south was that those that could afford it would take boats from Barry Island, Porthcawl, from Cardiff, and cross the Bristol Channel and go to some of the West Country resorts in England as well. So that's another difference. I think for the miners as well, places like Barry Island, Porthcawl are doable for day trips and trippers, so they could expand that way. But Saundersfoot's further away and possibly slightly more exclusive. Because when my aunt, who was in service, used to go on holiday with her employers, used to take her to Saundersfoot, and they took the servants as well. But I think perhaps the less well-off would go to, or later on would go to Tenby. But again, it's further away, so it costs more to get there and takes more time if you've not got very long away.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. And Becky asks again, thanks for the answer. So many things in your talk I'd never have thought of, never heard or thought of. Those postcards are amazing. I hope someone does a project or PhD on them. I'm left wondering about the collector. Are you able to share any information about the collector with us, Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know, other than his name, I don't know a lot about him. It was a Mr. Teese, and yeah, I don't know, but he must have been a really keen historian. Yeah.
Yes. Can I ask, are all the postcards written on? Have they all been posted? So some of them are.
No, some of them are blank. Yeah, yeah. Quite a few are written on. I feel like we missed a bit of a trick when we were doing the scanning. We should have done both sides of the ones that were written on, because I think that's interesting in itself, isn't it, to see where they've come, where they were going to,
and maybe that's something that you can go back to. Yeah. Hopefully, back of.
An interesting comparison on postcards might be if you're looking at what people have written. Some people say that postcards were like the text message of their day. Perhaps compare the language that's used. Abbreviations and so on, common phrases that are repeated, and to just compare them with modern day short communications.
Sorry, I was just looking at the chat then. I don't
Got
think
to
I've not
ask
come
this
across
next
any yet.
question. Oh, this is from Daryl Perrins, and I've just got to read this one out. Debbie, did you have any dirty postcards donated? These are the ones I associate with my holidays the most. And I remember standing in different stalls looking at these at Phil, and my mother dragging me away. And there's Daryl with a photo of them.
I've not come across any yet.
So Mr. Tees obviously did not go as far as these. That's a brilliant question. When did Marine Lake close down as a fun fair, Debbie?
Oh, I feel like it was maybe the 60s or 70s.
Right, I think it was still going in the 60s.
Was it maybe the 70s then? Yeah.
Fond memories of
it's still, you know, obviously the lake is still there, and the railway is still there. Yeah.
Right, do any of you have any more questions or comments that you'd like to raise with our extremely knowledgeable speakers tonight? Right, now, before I hand over to Ian to pull everything to a close, could I just ask us quickly to unmute and give our two speakers, please, a massive round of applause. The presentations were just superb. Thank you. So much effort had gone into those excellent presentations. I can't thank you both enough. Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Marion. Well, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to extend a grateful thanks once again to you, Marion, for chairing tonight's event, and to Susan and Debbie for offering us such a range of fascinating insights into the history of heritage of seaside resorts and working class popular tourism. Many thanks indeed. Many thanks also to you, the audience, for your comments and questions via chat. Grateful thanks to the extremely hardworking members of Llafur Events Subcommittee for their help in organising and publicising this, and indeed all of Llafur's online events. As I said at the start of tonight's session, this was the second of 3 events in Llafur's spring series on heritage, landscape and tourism. The third and final event, entitled Reinventing Ourselves, a Conversation on Heritage, that will take place on Saturday the 9th of April from 11 AM to 12:15 PM. Further details will be advertised on the Llafur website, Facebook page and Twitter. Llafur members will also receive full details via email. If I can just also be permitted a quick membership plug, our website includes a membership sign-up facilities, a mere £15 to join, £10 for unwaged. So if you're not yet a member, please do consider joining. Our website also contains recordings of all our online events over the last 18 months when we first embarked on this new and exciting direction of travel in the history of Llafur, and tonight's event will also be uploaded soon. It only remains for me to say thank you once again for your support, and we look forward to welcoming you back to more Llafur online events in the near future. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn.